and beyond. More at shepherdmullen.com.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by C3.ai. C3.ai software enables organizations to use artificial intelligence at enterprise scale, solving previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai.
Here's the deal, everybody. This economy is going to be run by the stroke of the president's pen for quite a while to come. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Personal Capital, offering advice from fiduciary advisors and professional-grade financial tools. Learn more at personalcapital.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kyle Riznal. It is Monday, today the 25th of January. Good as always to have you along, everybody. While Democrats and Republicans in Congress try to hash out, well, they are hashing out a bunch of stuff, as we all know. But the big on our beat is that $1.9 trillion relief bill that President Biden's looking for. While they try to work on that, meanwhile, down at the White House, executive orders, actions, and memoranda are still the order of the day. The latest today, an order that then candidate Biden promised before the election, ordering the federal government to buy American. Flash yourself back 4 years, could have said the same sentence, just replacing Biden with Trump, which is to say this is a real popular policy. Thing is, as Marketplace's Kimberly Adams reports to get us going, it is not so easy to get done.
There have been laws and rules on the books for decades mandating the federal government buy American. And mostly it is, says Scott Miller at the Center for Strategic and International Studies.
The federal government buys about $600 billion a year worth of goods and services. Of that $600 billion, only 5% is not American-made now.
The government can ask for a waiver if American-made products are too expensive. Also, what counts as American-made? Government rules and trade agreements set thresholds for just how much of an item has to be made in the U.S. for it to be considered American. Lena Mosley is a professor of politics and international affairs at Princeton and says the Biden administration is making it harder to get around existing rules and saying,
there are too many loopholes and it's too easy to get a waiver. So we're going to tighten what counts as an American product. We're going to require more of a product's components to be U.S. made.
Those details matter a lot to U.S. industries that struggle to compete with global suppliers. Kevin Dempsey runs the American Iron and Steel Institute.
You need to be thinking about that entire supply chain and moving more of it back to the United States rather than just moving the last point of final assembly back to the U.S.
The Biden administration says it wants to incentivize manufacturers to do just that with the lure of more government contracts. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
About that proposed $1.9 trillion relief package, this observation. It's going to take some deficit spending, some borrowing, the government taking on new debt to get that done. A debate that is heating up, as predicted on this program. We're seeing the same thing at the corporate level as well, with a lot of companies deciding debt is really their only option right now. We learned today that AMC, the beleaguered movie theater chain, has raised more than $900 million in new financing, part of which is debt to get itself through this next part of the pandemic. And plenty of other companies have stacked up big piles of debt themselves in the last 10 or so months. Marketplace's Mariel Segarra reports on what that might mean for the economy long term.
So on the one hand, taking on debt can allow a company to survive in times of turmoil. Nathan Stovall at S&P Global Market Intelligence says without it,
you would have seen a lot of companies go out of business. But the fact that they've been propped up in the near term means that they're going to live to fight another day. It also means that they're going to be able to continue to employ people.
The debt is a bridge to whatever comes after this. But eventually companies are going to have to pay it back, and they'll need to be making enough money to do that. Problem is, we don't know yet if certain changes in consumer behavior, like avoiding movie theaters, will be temporary or permanent. Marco Rossi teaches finance at Texas A&M's Mays Business School.
Yeah, people will go back to normal, but it might be a new normal. So if those earnings that are required to finance the debt cannot be sustained in the future just because people will change their habits, then that new debt may be unsustainable.
Even if a company can make its debt payments, that's not the only problem it'll face. As anyone who's paid back student loans could tell you, when you have to put a big chunk of your money towards that bill every month, you don't have as much cash to spend. And in business, that means less money to grow or outmaneuver your competitors. That happened to a lot of the retailers that were saddled with debt by private equity firms and later shut down, like Toys R Us. Nathan Stovall again.
It's not just as simple as, do you meet the debt burden? Can you remain a competitive entity in your respective industry?
But ultimately, some companies don't have a lot of options right now. They can file for bankruptcy or take on the debt in the hopes that their business model will make sense again in a post-pandemic world. I'm Mariel Segarra for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, kind of mixed, but again, not a lot of enthusiasm either way. Really, we'll have the details when we do the numbers. Since the beginning of the year, some of the almost 16 million Americans who are still getting some kind of government unemployment assistance have been getting an extra $300 a week from the federal government, a top-up that was part of the relief package that got signed just after Christmas. And for a whole lot of people in this economy, that money is making a huge difference, as Marketplace's Samantha Fields reports.
When the first unemployment check arrived with that extra $300 in it, Lois Prue sat down and wrote a check of her own to the city of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, where she lives.
We were behind on the property taxes, like $600.
So that was the first thing she caught up on.
Now I want to focus on paying the water and sewer, which is $300.
Prue is 50, and she hasn't worked since March when she got laid off from her part-time job as a dishwasher at an inn. For the last few months, she's been surviving on $267 a week in state unemployment benefits.
When I was only getting the state benefits, we really couldn't pay the bills at all. Now with the $300, I can afford to pay bills, but I have to decide which bills am I going to pay, which are going to wait.
And there's really nothing left over. But that extra $300 does more than double her weekly unemployment checks. And that's true for a lot of people around the country. In more than a dozen states, the average weekly unemployment benefit is right around the federal poverty line for a one-person household. That's about $245 a week, or just under $13,000 a year.
What we know is that the $300 plus, the basic benefit will mean that unemployment is not a poverty level benefit.
Andrew Stetner is a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, and he says the additional money will make a big difference.
Most people are going to be able to not be facing a crisis, being able to meet most of their minimum needs.
Many people have not been able to do that since the end of July. That's when the first round of federal unemployment top-ups, $600 a week, stopped. Since then, more than 8 million people have fallen into poverty, according to researchers at the University of Chicago and Notre Dame.
The $600 payments were literally keeping people from starving.
Trevon Logan is an economics professor at Ohio State University. He says that extra money was especially important for people of color who have been more likely to lose jobs during the pandemic, and it helped the economy.
The $600 payments were one of the things that caused a bit of an uptick in economic activity in the third quarter of 2020. Well, $300 payments help. Certainly it's better than nothing, but it's not necessarily as good as $600.
That's how Courtney Henley feels. She's an event planner in New York who's been out of work since March. And the amount of money she gets in pandemic unemployment assistance alone,
let's just say it's not livable.
When she was getting the extra $600 a week, Henley was able to cover all her expenses and even save a little money. But once that expired back in July, she started to fall behind on her bills.
Because I didn't have enough to stay on top of everything.
She's now received 2 unemployment checks with the extra $300, and she's been using the money to start to catch up.
It's all going to like basic expenses. It goes to bills, food, cat food. That's about it.
No going out for pizza, no savings, nothing left over. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
Toward the end of the Trump presidency, the very end, we should say, we started hearing more from business leaders about politics than we usually do. Some companies suspended their political donations after the insurrection. There were calls from business for the 25th Amendment to be invoked. And even before that, some CEOs were urging Congress to accept the reality that President Biden had won. Rich Lesser was one of those signing that last letter. He's the CEO of Boston Consulting Group. So we got him on the phone to talk about where business is in meeting politics right now. Mr. Lesser, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Kai.
I was going to start with how the relationship between businesses and American politics have changed in the last 4 years. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you how they've changed in the last 4 weeks.
Well, we're still on a journey to find that out. But I believe what we're going to see is that there's actually an agenda that overlaps between what business wants to do on many fronts and what the new administration has said that they want to try to achieve. But how we do it will, of course, be a substantial conversation in the months and years ahead. And then there are areas, particularly in the area of tax and regulation, that could be somewhat contentious. And again, we'll see how it plays out. But I think there's certainly an openness to try to find common ground and move things forward from the business world looking at the new administration.
I wonder, though, Mr. Lesser, if there's a wariness given business's experience with the Trump administration, which is, we should be clear, sometimes you were in, sometimes you were out, sometimes you were targeted by the president, and sometimes you were his best friend.
I think the expectation is the behaviors across the two administrations are likely to be quite different. And the things that made it feel risky with the last administration won't be the same challenges of this one. It's not saying there won't be challenges this time. They'll just be different ones.
You are obviously the guy running a big consulting firm, so your job is to talk to other businesses, other CEOs. You're on the board of directors of the Business Roundtable, which is by definition putting you in contact with other CEOs and business leaders. What kind of conversations are you all having right now about the last, I don't know, number of months and weeks in this economy?
Well, I think the last couple months, the single biggest conversation has been about the election and the risks to American democracy and what's the appropriate role of business to, on the one hand, not try to be interfering ourselves in elections, and on the other hand, to make it clear that we stand behind democracy and free and fair elections. And of course, anytime you change administrations, and certainly when it changes parties, then, you know, how are things likely to evolve? What's the right ways to contribute? And then I guess maybe at the top of the list, I probably should have started there. How do we get beyond this pandemic, which is an ongoing conversation that's top of the list in many situations.
We should say here that a number of years ago, you served, in fact, on President Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum. Any regrets?
Mostly not. I mean, it's always a learning experience. I think it was for everyone. But I think about the issues. I served on it because we were told, and it was true, that we would have a chance to speak about things we cared about. And the 4 things that I spoke about in my brief tenure on that were not having a Muslim ban, having a strong trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, not blowing that up, supporting paid family leave, and staying in the Paris Climate Accord. I look back years later and I'd say I believe in all of those issues, and now most of them have happened, some in the last administration, some in this one. I think when you have a chance to contribute directly to leadership, you should do that. At some point it was clear it wasn't having the effect, and there was all sorts of other things that we were potentially being associated with, and it was time to withdraw, which the business community did. But I think you have to try with the new administration to advocate for things you think are important.
I should tell you, Mr. Lesser, we called a bunch of CEOs who were on the president's various councils and panels, and you were the guy who volunteered to come on and take questions on the radio, and I wonder what you make of that.
I think business leaders are all struggling with how prominent to be at a time of such division, and I really have a lot of empathy for that. And at the same time, I think we have to speak clearly on the one hand to support a range of views, and on the other hand, to speak in favor of our democracy and how we come together after such a difficult time. And I realize that it's challenging to know what the boundary lines are and to say it exactly right and not risk angering some, but I think it's the right thing to try to speak to that.
Fair enough. Rich Lesser, he's the CEO of Boston Consulting Group. Mr. Lesser, thanks for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kai.
Coming up.
Perseverance, improvement, and internal empowerment.
Pandemic or no, the Super Bowl is a-coming, and so too are most of the usual ads. But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's down almost 37 points today, about a 10%, 30,960. The NASDAQ up 92, almost 0.7% there, 13,635. S&P 500 found 13 points, 0.3%, 38 and 55, the double nickel. As you heard from Marielle, AMC, the country's biggest movie theater chain, had a rough 2020, but is confident it's going to be back to filling seats soon-ish. AMC stock up 0.9% today, and that is not all popcorn and Twizzlers, let me tell you. Cinemark rose almost 1.7% today. Bond prices rose as well. Yield on the 10-year T-note down to 1.03%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Parametric. ETFs aren't the only way investors gain broad passive exposure. Parametric helps financial advisors create custom portfolios that deliver diversification for today and tax efficiencies for tomorrow. More at CustomToTheCore.com. And by Cabot Creamery, owned and operated by a cooperative of 700 farm families in New York and New England, makers of cheddar cheese and other dairy products since 1919. Family-friendly recipes and children's programs at cabotcheese.coop. And by USB technology, found in billions of devices. USB Implementers Forum reminds consumers that USB-IF logos are displayed on certified USB products and are available at retailers worldwide. Look for the logos and get the whole story at enablingus.org.
You're listening to WNYC. We're cutting away from Marketplace a bit early tonight to give you special coverage from NPR. As you've been hearing throughout the day, the U.S. House of Representatives is set to deliver one article of impeachment against former President Donald Trump to the Senate. That is expected not long from now. We'll head to that special coverage in just a moment. Of course, you can join us for the latest tomorrow on Morning Edition and the Brian Lehrer Show. We'll be with you for all things considered in the afternoon. A quick weather update. There's a storm bearing down on us. The city has issued a snow alert starting at 2 a.m. tonight. Total accumulation of less than 2 inches is expected, but salt spreaders, plows are at the ready. The Department of Sanitation has been brining some roadways and bike lanes since Sunday evening. Open restaurants and roadway dining may continue throughout the storm, but the city is reminding property owners, including restaurants with outdoor dining structures, to not push snow into the street. Alternate side parking is also canceled for tomorrow.
WNYC supporters include Showtime documentary films presenting Belushi. Director R.J. Cutler examines the too short life of John Belushi, an icon who changed culture and comedy forever. Awards eligible, now streaming at sho.com/FYC. Hulu, presenting the original comedy series Rami. Creator, director, and star Rami Youssef is joined by Mahershala Ali for Season 2 of this series about faith, family, and finding yourself. Rami is awards eligible and now streaming on Hulu.
On the next Brian Lehrer Show, former presidential hopeful Andrew Yang will join us in his new role as candidate for mayor of New York. He's our latest guest in our first round of candidate interviews for the June primary, and as with all the others, Andrew Yang will take your calls. Also, we'll keep following the Biden administration as they hit day 7 in office with more than 30 executive orders and a big agenda for Congress. The Brian Lehrer Show at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
It's WNYC. Good evening. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and others are set to deliver a single article of impeachment against former President Donald Trump to the U.S. Senate tonight. The House voted 232 to 197 earlier this month to impeach Trump for incitement of insurrection for his role in the mob attack on the Capitol on January 6th. 5 people died in that attack. Tonight, Pelosi, the acting House Sergeant of Arms, and the impeachment managers will walk the article of impeachment from the House through the U.S. Capitol to the Senate. Representative Jamie Raskin, the lead manager, will then read that article of impeachment on the Senate floor. Again, we are just about to head to special coverage from NPR on WNYC. It's 36 degrees clear right now in Central Park, but snow is set to start after midnight. It's WNYC at 6:50.
This is live special coverage from NPR News of transmission from the House to the Senate of the article of impeachment against former President Donald Trump. I'm Elsa Chang. Here is what we're going to be watching within minutes at the U.S. Capitol. House impeachment managers are going to be literally walking across the Capitol building to hand deliver to the Senate the single article of impeachment against former President Trump for what lawmakers say is his role in inciting the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. Joining us now to talk about what we expect to unfold over the next few minutes and the next few weeks are NPR congressional reporter Claudia Grisales, who's at the Capitol now, and NPR White House correspondent Scott Detrow, who is at the White House. Hi to both of you.
Hey, Elsa.
Hey there. All right, Claudia, let's start with you. I mean, we have seen this movie before, just over a year ago.
Yes.
Just give us a brief overview of the ceremonial procession that we're going to be witnessing tonight.
Yes, we'll see the House clerk and the acting sergeant at arms leading this team of 9 impeachment managers to the Senate. It is reminiscent of what we saw just over a year ago when Trump was impeached the first time. But this time around, we'll see Jamie Raskin of Maryland leading this team of managers. That includes Joaquin Castro of Texas, Eric Swalwell of California, Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania, among others. They'll walk through Statuary Hall as well as the Capitol Rotunda before they reach this Senate chamber door. And then we'll see Raskin and the other managers in the Senate chamber, and he'll be reading the article tonight to the chamber.
Right, literally word for word. And Scott, of course, all of this is happening because of the riot at the Capitol on January 6th. Can you just remind us of President Trump's actions that day and what specifically Democrats are saying that justifies his impeachment?
Sure. Well, the backdrop was, of course, President Trump's refusal to concede that he lost the presidential election beginning in the middle of the night of election night. You and I were actually on the air live when he first tweeted that he actually won a race that he had not won, and he consistently pressured, threatened local state officials. There was that memorable call with the Secretary of State of Georgia where Trump asked him to just find about 12,000 more votes, as he was pressuring them for confirming the results of an election in which Joe Biden won the state of Georgia. Then on the day of the rally itself, President Trump spoke for more than an hour to a crowd on the other end of Pennsylvania by the White House. He said things like, "We're going to fight like hell," urged the crowd to march up to the Capitol, saying we're not going to have a country anymore. And the House Democrats have said that really kind of stirred the flames, agitated the crowd, and sent them in the direction of the Capitol, where they arrived and clashed with police, forced their way through barriers, broke windows to force themselves into the building. Then, of course, once the violence began happening, President Trump issued several statements, several tweets that were either ambivalent or even encouraging of what was happening. Of course, that video that he recorded late in the afternoon of the 6th, where he did urge people to be peaceful, ended with him saying, "You're special and we love you."
Right, a bit of a mixed message there.
Yeah, so the argument here is that he really encouraged this attack on the Capitol through the actions over the course of several months, and then the things he said and tweeted the day of.
Right. So just to be very clear, this article of impeachment takes aim not just at President Trump's action the day of the riot, January 6th, but his actions over the course of weeks following the election.
That's right. Several statements, tweets, things that he did. You'll recall among that call with Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, he called down the Republican leaders of the Michigan legislature as part of his quest to see if state legislatures could overturn their electoral college votes. Of course, those two lawmakers issued a statement saying, "We do not have that power. We're not going to do that." None of the key officials in the states that Trump focused on, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, to a lesser extent Arizona, none of them followed his lead when he urged them to to try and decertify the results of the election or appoint alternate electors as part of this effort that really culminated that day when Congress was certifying the results of the Electoral College. And at that point, President Trump was putting a lot of his pressure on his vice president, Mike Pence, making the false claim that Pence had the power to reject the Electoral College in Congress. Pence said
that Pence rejected himself.
He did. Pence said he didn't have that power, and then because of Trump's criticisms of him, including tweets after the riot had already started, there are lots of reports, lots of video of the insurrectionists in the hallways of the U.S. Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence" or "Find Mike Pence." Pence was secured in his office and then later at an undisclosed location, but many people in the building were looking for him and were angry at him based on what the president had told them.
Right. Okay, and Claudia, obviously today's transmission of the article of impeachment sets in motion a trial in the Senate, a trial that is set to happen around February 9th, right? Can you just remind us why we're going to be waiting a couple weeks before we see this Senate trial begin?
Yes, this is part of a deal that was reached between Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. So they had reached this agreement because Republicans wanted to give Trump more time to prepare for this trial. Meanwhile, Democrats are in limbo. Their committees have not been set in terms of Democratic lawmakers leading those. That's part of a stalled discussions right now between the leaders on power sharing, because now this chamber is split 50-50. So they are in limbo trying to figure that out. Meanwhile, they've confirmed about 3 of Biden's nominees. Another nominee was confirmed tonight, Janet Yellen for Treasury Secretary, but they still have a long list of nominees to get to. So this will give Democrats time to catch up there. Meanwhile, Democrats are also trying to get more legwork done on a $1.9 trillion proposal from the Biden administration to push through another wave of coronavirus relief. So both sides saw it as a win-win to try and get these to-do list items done as quickly as possible before the trial begins, as you mentioned, February 9th. Until then, they'll be doing a lot of pretrial work. Senators will be sworn in tomorrow. The Senate will issue its summons for Trump tomorrow as well. Next week, we'll add some more pretrial steps. We'll see the Senate go through those. And then on Monday, February 8th, briefs are due, and it's that following day when senators will be beginning that trial. They'll have to sit quietly as jurors for days and hours at a time. And again, reminiscent of what we saw last year.
Right. They are required to sit in the chamber throughout the whole proceedings. And as you say, there is a very, very long to-do list, legislative to-do list that will somehow have to be fit into these trial proceedings. We will talk a little bit later about how those two things will interact as they are happening in parallel. But Claudia, do we know at this point if there will be enough Senate Republicans who are open to convicting Trump?
We really don't. We know there's a possibility of a few Republicans who could join Democrats to convict Trump, especially a few moderate members who have already said he played a role in inciting this January 6th mob. Mitch McConnell has also left the door open for the potential that he, too, could be considering a vote to convict the president. That could sway a lot of members of his caucus to also vote to convict. But Democrats need 2/3 of a majority in the Senate chamber to convict. So that's 17 Republicans that would need to join them. And we're hearing from a lot of Republicans like John Cornyn of Texas who are saying that this is out of bounds. He's no longer president, that this Senate impeachment trial shouldn't be pursued, that he shouldn't be convicted. And so we're seeing